Alrighty, everyone. I am Faith Collins. I'm the Community Capacity Coordinator at the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, also known as SPC. I am going to try and get out of acronym soup, which I don't think is the term, but that's okay. Today I'm presenting on federal funding opportunities for workforce and economic development. This is brought to you due to the kindness of Lisa, who is on with us today, of the Arts Council, and Patrick. I am what I would consider a frustrated artist myself, so I am happy to be doing this today. I want to start off with some caveats up front. We don't know what the federal funding space is going to look like going forward. There's already been a couple of big changes. Everything I'm talking about today was already subject to change. It's even more subject to change now. So if timelines shift, if funding structure shifts, just keep that in mind. Some of this is based off of information that's been true for years, but may not be true going forward. So ton of caveats up front. So we'll go and get started here. All right. So here's an overview of the agenda for today. I've been given feedback that I talk very quickly, so I'm going to try and cool that out and not talk in acronyms. So we're going to do an overview of SPC and our Economic and Workforce Development Department and the kind of assistance that we provide, which goes above and beyond grant technical assistance, which is what I do here at SPC. Our roles that are federal designations as a local development district and economic development district. Shorthand for those is LDD and EDD. I will get into what those mean in a few slides here. Some funding opportunities from the Appalachian Regional Commission, some funding opportunities from the Economic Development Administration, as well as other funding opportunities. I'll give some examples of success stories and then how we can work together. And I've kind of focused this so that it would come from an arts organization perspective. I met with Patrick, I believe, in fall of last year, and he has introduced me to so many arts organizations, many of which are on this call right now. So it's kind of give me an idea of there is a language barrier from what I've seen between arts organizations and grant makers. Arts organizations think of these big creative ideas, whereas grant writing, especially at the federal level, is very finite and focused. So when working with arts organizations, my job is to kind of narrow that focus and kind of funnel it into one specific grant ask. So I will give some common pitfalls for applicants, and we'll kind of go through what's going to be needed to apply for federal funding if interested, and will be a good fit for federal funding if interested, and some best practices as well. All right, moving along here. Okay. Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, or SPC, is your regional commission. County commissioners make up our board. We're a Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, which is the transit side of the house. We are also a local development district, as I mentioned, or LDD, an economic development district. We have several federal designations, which means that we are in charge of federal plans and federal transit plans and economic development plans for the region. You can see the region right here. So for the LDD designation, that means that I am assisting applicants that are located in Allegheny, Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Fayette, Greene, Indiana, Washington, and Westmoreland counties. Our MPO designation also includes Lawrence. If you are outside of that service area, you can follow that link at the bottom to find your local development district who can provide you assistance. It's based on location. You can see here the different colors on that map. So this is pulled from arc.gov. That's for the Appalachian Regional Commission, and it shows match requirements based on county economic distress status. Now we're getting a little in the weeds here. We're going to be talking about match a lot going forward. So I want to give you just an idea as you're thinking about projects, you're thinking about your service area, you're thinking about where you're located. So those white counties are going to be deemed transitional, and this changes every fiscal year. So this is what it looks like for FY25. So the transitional counties, and this is informed, dictated by population growth, unemployment, and other economic factors, are dictated as transitional. That means that they have a 50% match rate. That is kind of a misnomer. It's 1-to-1. For each dollar you're requesting from the federal government, you're bringing in $1 in match. Fayette County is deemed as at risk, meaning it's a 30% match requirement. So you're bringing in 30% of match and then you can request up to 70% match for ARC grants. Butler County was the only county in southwestern Pennsylvania that experienced any kind of population growth, and that's through Cranberry Township. It is designated as competitive, meaning it's the opposite of Fayette County. You're bringing in 70% match and can request up to 30%. If you're doing a project that takes place in the region, so it's a multi-county project, it's an average of the different counties that you're working with. I can help figure out match rates. I just wanted to go through what this map means to give you an idea of what that looks like going forward. Don't feel like you have to memorize this map. The slides are going to be sent out along with the recording and some follow-up material after this presentation. There won't be a quiz on what designation Butler County has at the end. All right, so EDA, Economic Development Administration, and ARC, Appalachian Regional Commission, have given us these designations. As a local development district, that means that we are tasked with providing grant technical assistance to any and all potential grant applicants in our region, which was the map that I just showed on the last slide. Grant technical assistance means hand-holding step-by-step from grant concept, grant idea, to application, letter of intent crafting, submission, and then hopefully grant award and grant administration. I can assist with each step of that process. I am an expert in each step of that process. That's what I'm tasked to do. That's what ARC pays me to do. That's what EDA pays me to do as well. So I work on the workforce and economic development side of the house within SPC, specifically working within the LDD and EDD side of the house. My big parts of my job are just grant technical assistance. SPC is the largest LDD within ARC's, what they define as Appalachia. We have a bigger population than the entire state of West Virginia. And West Virginia is the only state that's entirely considered part of Appalachia. The other 12 states that make up Appalachia are only partially considered Appalachia. So for Pennsylvania, it's 52 counties out of 67. It's anything from Harrisburg west. It's a way to think about it. So Philadelphia is not included as part of ARC's designation. Match requirement, but it is not the same as ARC's. I can go through what that looks like. It depends on which census tracts or zip codes that you're working with. How they define underserved areas is different than ARC's map. Okay. All right, we are also the regional fiscal partner for Partnerships Regional Economic Performance, or PREP network. You can see upcoming DCD grant opportunities. That's separate and apart from our PREP network designation. So we also work with the state, specifically through the Department of Community and Economic Development, or DCED. The PREP network is a network of small business supports that report to SPC. We have meetings every other month to review how things are going, meeting metrics, events coming up that are supporting small businesses in the region. So that is another part of what we do here at SPC. We also provide small business support. So while I'm working with nonprofits, because nonprofits primarily are the ones that are eligible for federal funding, my colleagues within Workforce and Economic Development Department can work with small businesses, including business finance assistance, which is our commercial loans program. These are loans for that are at a lower interest rate. I'm including all contacts for the entire department at the end of this presentation. We have an export development program that's for small businesses that are interested in exporting their goods and services overseas. And finally, we have a government contract technical assistance program. So what I do, but for profits that are interested in getting into the government contract space, there can be public art contracts available, at least at the county level and city level. I've seen those before because I used to have that job at SPC. That also means that I am very familiar with federal registration, which is required both for small businesses interested in getting it into the government work marketplace, and same registration system for reward management is also required for nonprofits interested in receiving federal funding. Same registration is free. There's a lot of SAM scams out there that are trying to get money out of small businesses and nonprofits that don't know how to work SAM. If you have questions about SAM, let me know. I can provide assistance with that, or my colleague Erin Sims can if you are a small business. My program is community capacity program, so I'm supporting local government, nonprofit, and community development with getting federal grants. Finally, we are the Keystone Opportunity Zone Coordinator. It's a tax credit program, and we are also the Project 3 lead for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge through EDA. All right, so I kind of went through this already. Another part of the EDD designation, like I said, we are in charge of economic development plans for the region. That is our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS plan. Ours is included in our long-range transportation plan, which is called SMART Moves. So that every single application that I work on has to be aligned with our CEDS plan, has to mention a specific goal within SMART Moves, so that there's regional alignment, there's state alignment, because state goals also have to be referenced, and there's federal alignment. Now, these goals are big and broad on purpose. We'll go through what EDA's goals look like, because they're subject to change. ARC's goals are big and broad on purpose, and ARC projects have to have something to do with economic development in the Appalachian region. So employing Appalachians to keep them in Appalachia, anything along those lines. ARC's funding goals, and we'll see if I can remember these, are building Appalachian business, building Appalachian's workforce ecosystem, building Appalachian infrastructure, building Appalachian culture and tourism, which I think will be of interest to many attendees on this call, and building Appalachian community capacity and leadership. So that can be leadership development programs. If anybody wants to give me extra credit for remembering all those, I'd be happy to take it. No big deal. So part of my job also includes identifying what the goals are, talking through budget, talking through program design. So assisting with determining project eligibility and competitiveness of application. So is this a good fit for ARC or EDA? If not, let's find other options. I'll go through some of those other options in this presentation. Partners needed, potential matching sources needed. Again, we'll go through those, and needs assessment data. So, all right. So here are the different funding opportunities available through ARC. Not all of these are available right now. And some of these have formerly had an ongoing deadline. That is changing with the new administration. Area development is ARC's landmark funding stream. Each state that is considered to be part of Appalachia, so Pennsylvania is one of those, for those 52 counties, is given a pot of money with the state agencies. So for us, that is DCD, Department of Community and Economic Development. DCD puts out a call to the local development districts, which I am one of 7. Not me, we at SPC are one of 7 LDDs for invitations to submit pre-applications, which are letters of intent. They're 2-page white papers that are an overview of what the project is going to look like. Area development usually opens up in July of each year. For each applicant I talk to, I put them on a mailing list, which is basically a list of applicants that is put into my CRM. I then send out different notices for whenever different grant opportunities open up. I provide information on how to apply and technical assistance that I can provide. I send out this email maybe 5 times a year. If you are interested in getting on this mailing list, you can feel free to let me know. You can send me an email after this presentation is over, or you can sign up for ARC's newsletter at arc.gov. So area development usually opens up in July, with pre-applications due sometime around early to mid-August. DCD reviews, sends out invitations to the local development districts to review full applications. We are in the midst of the review period with DCD of those full applications now. Area development is an ongoing deadline, although right now DCD is in the midst of reviewing, so they're not accepting new pre-applications at this time, but that is subject to change. arises for multi-state projects within Appalachia to encourage, if you have questions as I'm going through this, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll have time for questions at the end. Arises to encourage multi-state collaboration between Appalachian states. The ask for this is higher. Again, projects that would be eligible would have to have something to do with economic development, keeping in mind that match requirement that we looked at before. All right, so multi-state it's to encourage multi-state collaboration for any of these ARC funding opportunities. Planning grants and implementation grants are available. Planning grant would be funding for a study to pay for either an advisory committee or for a consultant to complete a plan that's going to kind of set the pathway for an implementation grant. Whereas an implementation grant includes project activities, programming, anything along those lines. Planning is not going to include activities other than the plan. Implementation can include activities. Power would normally be open right now. It has not been released as of yet. No updates on when that will be opening. Powers for coal impacted communities in Appalachia. Every single county within SPC's region has been affected by the decline of the coal industry. So making that coal narrative, which is part of a power application, we can assist with that. DCD is also contracted grant consultants so that Pennsylvania applications are the most competitive. And this has resulted in us being the winningest LDD in Appalachia for 2 years for power. You can find out more information about power at this link. I believe they may have the RFP, which they call a notice of solicitation of applications. It's a request for proposals, which is information on how to complete the grant application and requirements at that link for last year. Powers competed across Appalachia. Last year, $65 million was available to power applicants. We don't know what power is going to look like coming up. I would say power is preferential to workforce development opportunities. When I say workforce development, I mean job training opportunities. Could be any kind of program that takes individuals, puts them through job training so that they can be employed or they will be employed at the end of programming. Inspire is for substance abuse recovery workforce development initiatives. So those that are getting back into the workforce that are in recovery would be a good fit for Inspire. The letter of intent for that was due last Friday on Valentine's Day, so that is closed for now. An LOI kind of saves a spot. If you've not submitted an LOI, you would not be eligible to submit a full application, which is due March 10th of 2025. You can find more information and sign up for the newsletter for all these updates at arc.gov. You can find a link to the county economic distress map that I showed before for all the counties in Appalachia as well. So these funding opportunities bring in millions of dollars to our region yearly. We assisted with over $24 million for power last year. And please know, ARC funding amounts vary year to year. And as you can already see, timelines also vary for year to year. Arise is closed for right now. We anticipate it'll open back up in April. There's kind of a backlog of letters of intent. They're called concept papers to be reviewed. ARC's team is working on that. We've been told April. Again, that is subject to change. Okay, moving along. So this is on pause for right now with the EDA. So I mentioned ARC's funding opportunities. EDA's funding opportunities are equity, recovery and resilience, workforce development, manufacturing, technology-based economic development, environmentally sustainable development, exports and foreign direct investment. We anticipate this may change moving forward. We don't know what that's going to look like. So this is on hold for right now. This NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, has been pulled. So we're going to keep it moving after this. Now we can always take a look at state grants. So I've included one from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is federal, Environmental Protection Agency, which is federal, both of those subject to change. However, there are several grant programs and tax credit programs, and some of these are funded through gambling dollars. So local share account is gambling dollars. The link for that is right here. It's going to be included in the slides afterwards. That's whenever you partner with the municipality to apply. I would say it's pretty good for equipment purchases. So LSA is a good option for that. Gaming, economic development, tourism fund, I believe, is open year round. Don't quote me on that. Local share accounts should be opening in spring, I believe, and neighborhood assistance program should be opening in spring as well. These are managed by the Department of Community and Economic Development, or DCD, which is the state agency. Neighborhood assistance program is a great program. It's a tax credit program where you identify a for-profit company that has a tax liability. If they write you as a nonprofit a check, they receive a percentage off of their tax liability to the state. They already have to pay taxes, but they could make write out a check to you for a specific project or program, and then the state will serve as a subsidy for their tax liability. It's a great program. I think tax credit programs are excellent programs. Not included on here is the Education Improvement Tax Credit Opportunity, which is EITC. That is, if you are an education improvement organization, you've gone through the registration process. That's another tax credit program where you're identifying a for-profit business. They get an amount off their tax liability. Great opportunity. Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program is good for construction. And then the Gaming Economic Development Tourism Fund, which I believe is most prominent in Allegheny County, goes through the county executive's office. And so long as it has something to do with economic development, it's a good option. So these are some other options that I talk with applicants about. If they're not a good fit for ARC, if they're trying to identify potential match sources, it's always good to take a look at state opportunities. If you have questions, you feel free to get in touch with us. I'm going to go through some examples here. Not all of these are going to be relevant, but I wanted to just show here's some of the projects that I help on, the kind of work that I do. As I was thinking about arts organizations that I've worked with in the past, I did not necessarily have a good example of an arts organization that had been awarded in recent years, though I am going to talk a little bit about Rivers of Steel and their Power Award, and how they, as an arts organization, arts adjacent organization, were able to get awarded. So around the same time area development opens up, local access road opens up as well. This is to repair a road to assist with economic development in a specific area. So this was Matthew Road from last year, Matthew Drive, excuse me, in Fayette County. So this road needed to be resurfaced. It serves a ton of businesses in Uniontown. We made the request to DCD, who reviews local access road. They invited for us to submit a full application, and South Union Township was awarded over $2 million, which is a big deal. Also services a transfer center for public transit. So this was a good project. They're all good projects, of course. So this was a union project for local union 354, which is plumbers and pipe fitters, located in Youngwood, PA, which is in Westmoreland County. If you've been to Westmoreland County Community College, that's also in Youngwood, just for reference. So this was for their joint apprenticeship and training committee. It was to pay for trainers and some of their programming and equipment. So this is to assist with on-the-job training for plumbing, welding, pipe fitting, steam fitting, and HVAC. So it will serve 25 businesses that are willing to hire these individuals in 14 counties, which is a huge service area, create 2 jobs, which would be those trainers, and improve 25 trainees. So this would be an example of a workforce development program for those who may not be familiar. These are the kind of metrics that ARC is interested in. And ARC is interested in their specific metrics. You can track above and beyond and outside of that, but they're going to be looking for their specific metrics in the section of your application called performance measures. Moving right along and checking time. All right. This is an example of a winning Arise application. This one is almost finished. So this was to discover how people are getting to work in Appalachia. So it takes place in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. Part of their application, this is through CMU, specifically their Metro 21 program, was to bring together all these different partners. Well, this was a plan and grant as well. So this was to hold regional meetings and to ask, how are people getting to work in your area? Who are the biggest employers in your area? So that their eventual goal will be to apply for implementation funding so that they can set up transportation hubs in those areas that are in need. So this is wrapping up here shortly. Really cool project. ARC typically does not do follow-on funding. So they period of performance for an implementation grant is 3 years. It's not like you can go back to them as a funder and request funding for the same project. It's like they're doing seed money so that your project can get started. And after that, part of your application to ARC includes sustainability. What are your plans to keep this program going after ARC funding has been exhausted? So while that's the case over here, if you're requesting funding for a planning grant, you get together a plan. Planning grant lasts a year. You have a plan for implementation. At that point, you can go back to ARC and request funding for implementation. It's a separate ask from the plan, and you've already got a really good start on where you're going to go with implementation because you have that planning grant. So while ARC does not typically do follow-on funding, they may do a planning grant and then an implementation ask. That's not to say that ARC does not fund the same applicant twice. They do, so long as the ask for one project is separate than an ask for a different project. The match sources are different. It's two completely different funding streams and two completely different projects. And they typically would not go on simultaneously. Maybe you're serving as a partner or a subawardee on a different ARC grant. You're the main applicant on a separate project. And an organization is not encouraged to apply twice on the same funding stream. So submitting 2 letters of intent for power, for example, because you're competing against yourself. So if you want to put together a planning grant on what would be the best option to get started, I don't think planning grants are ever a bad idea. I think that they are a great idea because part of your planning grant, one, match isn't as high a requirement because planning grants are typically lower than implementation. So your match is not as high, but part of the scope of work of your planning grant can include options for sustainability and potential match sources for implementation. So you're kind of putting together a roadmap during the plan. So that's my 2 cents. All right, here's an example of an Inspire winning application. This was for PA Organization for Women in Early Recovery. This was from 3 years ago. So having an applicant named Power and having a funding stream named Power gets very confusing. For the purposes of this slide, whenever I say Power, I'm talking about the organization, not the funding stream. There we go. So Inspire, just as reminders for substance abuse disorder, workforce development programs. So PA Power was already working with this community. It was very easy for them to make the argument that they're doing workforce development because they are. They're doing hard skills training, employment counseling, resume development, assistance with job searches and job matching. So you can see it's different than the union because they're kind of providing the soft skills on the outset, but they're helping these women get back into work as they're in recovery. So this is a great project. Power was also awarded area development funding last year for construction of their Power campus, which is incredible. It's amazing. So that is Power. That's an example of an Inspire project. All right, moving right along here. Okay. All right. Now we're going to take a look at the funding stream Power and a success story through Rivers of Steel. So Rivers of Steel did a Partners for Creative Economy project. They're doing workforce training as part of this. As I mentioned earlier, Power is preferential, though it's not exclusionary, preferential to workforce development programs. So part of this ask was also to include mini grants. So it's bringing together community groups, municipal leaders, heritage tourism assets to provide community and economic development needs. So it's serving businesses, which means ARC's goal 1, 14 workers, trainees. That's the workforce development part right there. And that's goal 2, 22 communities and 72 participants. So good numbers, good service area. They're doing a creative leadership program. They're assisting workers and trainees. So this was why it was a good power project. These pictures are from an iron pour that I went to last July, and it was a great time. And I love Carey Furnace already. Moving right along here. Okay, here's another example of a successful power initiative project. This is the Trade Institute in Pittsburgh. So this is 1.5 million to serve workers and trainees. So this served 138 workers and 10 businesses by the end of the grant period. They are bringing individuals into their facility. They're training them through apprenticeship programs. They're getting them driver's licenses, and they're getting them back into the workforce by connecting them with businesses. So they're providing them with how to be employed and some soft skills and the hard skills to get employed. So this was an example of a successful power application that was awarded 2 years ago. Kind of nuts. Okay, this is a not conclusive list, but just some examples of, I showed the success stories as you're thinking about ideas for things that you need to have funded, things that would be a good fit, may not be a good fit for federal funding. So primarily I'm assisting with economic development opportunities. Some of those include, and this is based off successful applications, so it's not all encompassing. Regional or countywide economic development planning grants, as I mentioned, workforce development training programs, again, as I mentioned, multi-state economic development planning or implementation, that is for a RISE, although power applications can also be multi-state. We're not sure the status of those for right now, so that may not be a good one at this time. Substance abuse recovery workforce development projects, again, Inspire's closed for this year, though we anticipate it'll open again next year, all subject to change. Leadership development initiatives, thinking about ARC's Goal 5 of community capacity and leadership, and small business incubators, thinking about ARC's Goal 1. I have linked ARC's funding goals, EDA's funding goals, all subject to change, as well as Governor Shapiro's 10-year economic development strategy. While this is this is different than PA's Appalachian Development Strategy, which those goals, at least one of them needs to be referenced in every application. This is good to reference, and it's big and broad, again, on purpose. So Governor Shapiro's initiatives include invest in economic growth to compete, make government work at the speed of business, open doors of opportunity for all Pennsylvanians, innovate to win, build vibrant, resilient regions. That last one would be of good focus for arts organizations interested in working in this area. Okay. All right. Okay, I wrote a blog post. I was so thrilled to be invited to write a guest blog post. So I put the link for that here. It's a little different than what I'm presenting on today, but I'm going to sum it up for you here briefly. So make the connection with your work to economic development. This is kind of the language barrier that I was talking about before. So when you're thinking about how to craft your application, you're thinking about acronyms like return on investment. So you're almost thinking like a reviewer. When I say return on investment, the grant maker is thinking, what are we going to get out of investing in this project? What is that going to look like? So you're thinking in terms of metrics, and you're making the connection between your work and economic development. How do you do that? What is that bridge? Phrases like arts vibrancy, I think, are that bridge. The creative industry is huge in Southwestern PA. Use statistics, get specific. The creative industry jumped to $30 billion in PA this year. That is good information to be including in your applications. You want to make the walk from your work to economic development, meaning how is the region going to benefit economically from this project as short as possible. That's the way to be thinking as you're crafting your project design, your program design, your application. You're defining your return on investment, what the grant maker, and this applies really not just to federal funds, but also to state grant opportunities and private grant opportunities, foundations. Get specific, use statistics, know your project. Additionally, know your budget. How much do you cost per hour? How much does your team cost per hour? You're including salary and fringe benefits as well. Do you have a profit and loss sheet from last year ready? Not necessary, but it's always a good thing to have. Most federal grants work on a reimbursement schedule. Do you have enough operating funding available to put out money knowing that you will be paid back quarterly? If not, what kind of fundraising do you need to do in the interim to make sure that you can keep the lights on while you're doing this project that is funded by federal funds? Make sure that you are registered. I have had grants held up before because of system for award management registration. It's not complete or it is not correct. This is also the case for state grants. You have to be registered within the state system. If you follow this link, you will find a link to sam.gov and to state registration. Both are required whether you're applying for state grants, you got to do state registration. If you're applying for federal grants, you got to do federal registration. Cannot be awarded without these registrations. It never hurts to ask. Seeing if it's a good fit, seeing if somebody can write you a letter of support, building up your network, it never hurts to ask. Anticipate rejection, and if not, excellent. You know your work, be proud of it, and be ready to talk about its merits at a moment's notice. I may find elevator pitches corny, and it's never a bad thing to have in your back pocket. So, again, my 2 cents, do with that as you see fit. When you're considering about applying for a federal grant, some things to think about. Have you administered federal grants before? If not, that's not a big deal. Some options include, if you know somebody, maybe similar organization or big organization that you work with currently that is applying for a federal grant, asking to serve as a partner on that grant will give you, or a sub-awardee on that grant, meaning that you are a line item on a budget with this federal grant. You will still be responsible for some reporting, but your agreement is with the main applicant, is not with the federal government. So you get to build that experience of submitting reports without being a first-time applicant. You are going to be building up your experience as you're going along. It's not a bad idea to serve as a partner first before going for it as a main applicant on a federal grant. Also not a bad idea to have a state grant first. Part of your application for ARC includes organizational capacity. What kind of grants have you administered in the past? You would have some information in there, or have someone on your team with some experience that has administered federal grants and reporting and financial controls, all that information application. As I mentioned before, do you have the ability to work on a reimbursement schedule? If not, you may need to do some fundraising in the interim. These grants are not for keeping the lights on. These grants are for new programming, like I mentioned, seed money to get a program started. So it's funding to pay for a new position because you want to do a new program, but you need staff to do it. This is not to complete a continuation of what you're already doing. Maybe you want to expand into another county. Maybe you want to expand into a different part of the county you're currently in. But you need funding to maybe get some new equipment, new supplies, maybe to pay for some staff that already is in your on your staff, but they need maybe a part-time person, or they need funding to start this new program. Those would be good options because you're expanding or you're innovating. So expansion of current programming into new demographics, new geographies, or new programming. Those would be good options for federal grants, not a continuation of what you're already doing, not keeping the lights on. The funding for keeping the lights on, rent, insurance, really health insurance goes under fringe, but goes under a line item called indirect. You take your total project cost, which is total direct charges. I'm walking through a federal budget, so bear with me here. Your total direct charges, and you take 10% of that. That is your money to keep the lights on and to keep rent. This is not funding for office space. This is not funding to move into a new place. This is funding that's 10% of your total direct charges. Unless you have an otherwise agreed upon federal rate, which is a negotiated indirect cost agreement or NICRA, you would know if you have one of those. It would be an agreement set up by a previous federal grant that you'd be including that agreement in your new application. Most people do not have a NICRA, and most people are at the 10% de minimis rate for indirect, which is 10%. So this is for new and innovative programming, not a continuation of what you're doing, not for rent to keep the lights on. You would need to have funding to do that already. If not, again, because this is reimbursement, you may need to seek out other sources first. Private sources like foundations would be a better fit for that. In my experience, again, my opinion, do that as you see fit. Do you have funding sources who would be willing or are willing to provide match for your project? If yes, great. I'm including a match commitment template that will be sent after this presentation. So maybe you're getting funding from a foundation for your general operating, great. Then you're including a match commitment for that as part of your application. That is excellent. Having match secured, meaning cash in hand, I would say makes for a more competitive project. That's just me, rather than match that is pending. However, if you are working with a potential funder who says something along the lines of, I can't guarantee this funding until I get it approved at my next board meeting, they can provide match contingency, meaning, and I'm going to be providing a template for that as well. They can do a letter that says along the lines of, if this project is funded by ARC, by EDA, we are on the hook for this amount in match. If it is not funded, we will not be providing match. That could be an option for your funders as well. Or this needs to be approved at my next board meeting. I, as the program officer of this foundation, please let this serve as, placeholder in the interim. So there are options whenever it comes to match. Match can also be in kind, which can be staff time. I am getting incredibly hesitant about using in kind. In the case of a federal shutdown, in kind is not going to cover things like a new position's staff salary. In kind can be used, a good example for in kind match can be used if you're going to be doing a planning grant and you have an advisory committee and your match is comprised of your advisory committee's time. The plan is not going to stop in the case of a federal shutdown because you can pull down on that in kind match. That is not always the case for positions that maybe require cash match in the interim. Those are some things to think about. It's not impossible to use in kind. I would say keeping in mind what's going to happen in the case of a federal freeze or a federal shutdown. You want your project to continue going. Common pitfalls for applicants. Just went through match, just talked about match. Like I said, primarily it's one-to-one for this region. So for Inspire, for this round, match did not have to be secured. It needs to be secured by June. We don't know what power looks like. We do not know what area development looks like going forward. There is one opportunity that I forgot to put in here, and that is Ready Nonprofits. That is a training program for nonprofits for free. So you apply and your executive director and a board member must attend training sessions. There's 7 of them that happen, I believe, June to September of this year. And if you attend all of them, then you are eligible to apply for a $25,000 discretionary grant to use as you see fit. I can include that link as follow-up as well. That is due on 2/28, so coming up here very quickly. But just thought I'd mention that. That is through ARC. We don't know when that's going to be opening up again. Ready Nonprofits kind of comes open as it's under this umbrella called Ready Appalachian. It comes open whenever ARC sees fit. There we go. Okay. Navigating grant administration, reporting, and federal grant submission. That's what I'm saying. Serving as a subawardee first may not be a bad idea because then you get some sense of this. That being said, we can provide all aspects of grant technical assistance, including grant administration. And as I mentioned, DCD provides grant consultants for ARC applicants. And like I mentioned, applicants lacking the operating funding to sustain federal programming. If you're worried about keeping the lights on, this would not be a good place to get started. All right. All this follow-up information, including the website for my program, talking about eligibility, nonprofits, local government units, municipalities are eligible for federal funds. For-profits and individuals are not eligible. However, SPC provides a ton of technical assistance to small businesses if you are interested, if you are a small business. There's some cases where you can be eligible for state funding, but those are few and far in between. Contact information for me and for my entire team is located here. Questions, you feel free to ask. I'm going to check the chat now, see if chat to, let's see. Are nonprofits eligible for local share? Yes. So LSA, you have to identify a local government unit or municipality that would apply on your behalf. However, you can partner with them and request funding for your projects. So wherever you're located, if you have a good relationship with your municipality, township, borough, start having a conversation with them about LSA. Wanted to offer if anybody wants to unmute, I can take questions that way as well. Going once, going twice. I'm gonna check the chat again here. Hey.
Hi, actually, I do have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Raise my hand. Hi, my name is Małgorzata. Thank you for a very in-depth presentation, and I apologize if my question is fairly basic as I'm just starting to learn about this process. I represent an organization which is sort of a cultural nonprofit, and if we apply for any grants, that will be for arts events. We're more, one might say, ethnically focused, but we do put up a lot of arts events. For example, a film festival, or we invite many artists to come and perform. But our events are more sort of focused on particular genre of either classical music or something like that. I wonder if, given that we're not artists ourselves, but we organize art events such as concerts, etc., film festivals, we would qualify as a applicant under arts organization umbrella.
That is a good question because I have received this before. Funding for events. The ROI on that is tricky. I have not seen the federal grants that I work with fund an event unless it's part of a bigger programming ask. For that, I would actually say taking a look at the PA Council for the Arts funding opportunities because they are a grant making institution. I would start there for cultural opportunities. And that may be something to revisit with the Arts Council. I hope that answered your question. Sorry, I couldn't be of more assistance there.
No, this is great. So generally, I took away from that federal grants are more for more streamlined programs, holistically designed, and
Yeah,
that's kind of what I took away from your presentation as
yeah.
well. And for us, it's more sort of we support cultural activity in general, but we have an ongoing, let's say, film festival. So I don't know if that would sort of qualify, but yeah, I
If
don't know
it's
that.
a one-off event, probably not. But if it's part of, and I would say that the PA Council on the Arts, because those grants are smaller, that may be a better option.
Better option, yeah. We definitely
Yeah.
have a smaller budget than what was presented. So,
It's all
yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. I'm taking a look at the so
Thank you.
no problem. Lisa had asked how can people schedule one-on-one meetings with you? Unfortunately, this is my busy season. But if you are interested, you can feel free to reach out to me. I would say having a program in mind, a project in mind, ready to go. Not ready to go, but you've got something in mind you want to see a good fit or not. Um, that would be ideal for starting a conversation. You can feel free to email me. In terms of exploratory conversations, I will have more time for that coming up in spring. I don't know what the landscape's going to look like coming up. That being said, I am clearly happy to talk for long periods of time about this stuff. And I'm tasked with talking to anyone that's interested in federal funding. The only thing that I'm limited on is time. So that being said, it's not to deter anyone from reaching out to me. Please feel free to reach out to me. If you have a specific project in mind, we can talk about that, pretty cut and dry. In terms of exploratory conversations, I'm going to have a ton more time for that coming up. I'm just checking the chat here. Hi, Sam. All right. Okay. Mona already included a link in the chat. Love to see it. Okay, local share resources is going to be included in the slides that will be sent out. There's a link to those along with other DCD opportunities. I think that I got everything. Anything else? All right, looking here. Okay. All righty, guys. I just want to thank the Arts Council for allowing me to talk today. I put this in my blog, I put it on LinkedIn, but I like I said, frustrated artist. So the chance to do this today is a very big deal to me, and I'm really looking forward to increasing my partnership with the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. One more question we got going on here. Yes, LSA local and LSA state funds that are separate. And because I believe you're in Fayette County, that's a different source.